Good morning, again. There was a church in Nashville, Tennessee, where the people dressed very nicely for worship each week. Now, on a particular Sunday, a man wandered into this church at the start of their big worship service and settled himself and his belongings down on one of the few pews up front, because all of the ones at the back were already full. You see, that gives you an idea already about what kind of church we're talking about. Anyway, this fellow got all of his bags and so forth settled, and he sat quietly and he enjoyed the whole worship service. And after the service, the pastor of the church came up and shook his hand and said, "Nice to meet you." And then in a more hushed voice, the pastor said to him, "We are glad that you are with us here today. We would like you to come back next week. But you'll see that we get ourselves all fixed up here at this church for worship so that we can show our respect to God. And so before you come back next week, I would like you to go and pray and ask God what He thinks you ought to wear to church next week when you come." Well, the next week, the fellow was back, and he was wearing basically the same clothes he had on the Sunday before. And again, he brought his bags in, stuffed with dirty blankets and the like. And again, the pastor went up to him after worship and said, "Son, it is so nice to see you. But I thought I asked you to pray and find out what the Lord wanted you to wear as a sign of respect when you came to church." And the man said, "I did that, Pastor. I prayed to God and I asked him what I should wear, and he said, 'Heck if I know, I've never been to that pastor's church.'" Same, right? Many a house of God has an integrity problem these days. And the way I see it, Easter Sunday may be our most problematic Sunday of all. You see, the institution of Christianity is full of folks saying one thing and doing something else. Or doing one thing and meaning something else. Or worst of all, doing a whole lot of things and not really knowing what any of them mean. And with that said, we may as well address the elephant in the room that appears to have integrity problem graffitied on his backside. That elephant's name would be the resurrection of Jesus Christ our Lord. I want to go ahead and share our gospel story with you today. This comes from Luke. At the crack of dawn on Sunday, the women came to the tomb carrying the burial spices they had prepared. They found the entrance stone rolled back from the tomb, so they walked in. But once inside, they couldn't find the body of the Master, Jesus. They were puzzled, wondering what to make of this. Then, out of nowhere, it seemed, two men, light cascading over them, stood there. The women were awestruck and bowed down in worship. The men said, "Why are you looking for the living one in a cemetery? He is not here, but raised up. Remember how he told you when you were still back in Galilee that he had to be handed over to sinners, be killed on a cross, and in 3 days rise up." Then they remembered Jesus' words. They left the tomb and broke the news of all this to the 11 and the rest: Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them, kept telling these things to the apostles. But the apostles didn't believe a word of it, thought they were making it all up. But Peter jumped to his feet and ran to the tomb. He stooped to look in and saw a few grave clothes, that's all. He walked away, puzzled, shaking his head. All four gospel writers relate some version of the resurrection story. Mark's is the least complete, and there is some speculation that what we now know as the end of Mark was added at a later time, but they all do have some details about this third day after the crucifixion. I have specifically chosen Luke's version for today, though, because I love the bewilderment in it. I love the fact that the women who came to wash and prepare the body of Jesus for burial are puzzled by what they see, or more to the point, what they don't see. I love the fact that Peter, who promised that he would never deny the truth about Jesus, can't figure it out. Luke tells us that he walks away shaking his head in disbelief. I love these verses because they make me feel like my own puzzlement over this story is not inappropriate or necessarily unfaithful. Now, I'm not going to embarrass you by asking for a show of hands, but I suspect that there are at least a few of you who have a difficult time swallowing this whole resurrection thing, hook, line, and sinker. In fact, you may be in the camp who finds the whole church experience a little galling, because this is the one arena in your life in which you are asked to check your very capable brain at the door. After all, we tell wild stories in this place about whales who belch up grown men, and seas that part in two so that a mass of runaway slaves can escape capture. These stories defy what we know to be true about the physical laws of the universe and the basic biology that forms the parameters of life on planet Earth. And the resurrection story is sort of the cherry on this Sunday of fantastical stories, a dessert of stories that, while comforting and pretty, seem to have nothing at all to do with the rest of the world our scientific brains process and quantify every other day of the week. It's a real conundrum for the thinking Christian. A real conundrum, that is, until it isn't. Because here's the thing. We don't necessarily know what we think we know. I've been reading a book lately that spells out beautifully for the non-scientist what a lot of actual scientists have been leaning toward for decades now, which is that what we know is a lot less clear than we think. To give credit where it is due, the book is Rod Bell's What We Talk About When We Talk About God. So here are a few things to consider. There are things that we take for granted on the day-to-day level of our lives that don't really apply when we begin to dig under the surface and look at how things happen on that level. I'm speaking here not just about the atomic level. We all know about atoms and so forth. We learned that in our 10th grade physics class, right? What I'm talking about is the subatomic world. That amazing, hidden realm within and without us that comprises everything that affects us, from light to motion to energy to life. Now, I am not a physicist. I am not even close. As a matter of fact, the longer I think about these things, my brain literally begins to hurt from the effort of it. But here's something that I do understand, and I think I can explain it to you in a way that you will understand. It has to do with something that electrons do, are doing, and will continue to do, even as I explain this to you. It is leaping. Electrons leap, and not just any kind of leaping, but quantum leaping, as Niels Bohr named it. So electrons, just to be clear, are subatomic particles, which means that they are even smaller than the atoms which they help make up. So if you took 1 billion atoms and you lined them up end to end, the thickness of that would not exceed the thickness of a strand of hair on your head. And the electrons then are even smaller than that. But these little bitty particles do something that you and I cannot do. They disappear in one place and appear somewhere else instantaneously and without traveling the distance between those two places. That's a quantum leap. And the discovery of these leaps led to many even more mind-blowing discoveries, like some subatomic particles are simultaneously everywhere and nowhere in the same instant, and some of them communicate with one another without the benefit of a signal. The study of the subatomic world has led to discoveries about particles your 10th grade physics teacher didn't even know about.